Hi, folks. Once again, welcome to another episode of YFTT. This week's talk is about a couple of very interesting and critical security features around, password checking and ensuring, password strength and login profiles, and what are some of the rules governing what happens when you log in. But before we jump into that, I have with me Rajat, who's you'll hear from the horse's mouth. So he's actually worked on these features. Rajat, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and we can get started? Oh, and by the way, if you have questions, please feel free to post it on the LinkedIn comment box or join our community Slack, yugabyte.com/Slack, and go to the YFTT channel and we'll get back to you. But anyway, back to you, Rajat. Please introduce yourself quickly, a minute or so, we get started.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a database engineer. I work on Postgres and DST and so on and so forth, and I'm based out of Bangalore, right? One of the projects that I worked on was to improve password management. I'm going to talk about those two features over here, right? So I'm going to start off with the use case, right? So these features were motivated by asks by our customers, right? So the first ask was that a DBA wants to enforce rules for strong passwords, right? So this is very similar to popular websites. There are rules around minimum length, the combination of characters, alphabetical symbols, and so on and so forth. And these rules are enforced so that you force app developers and database users to choose strong passwords. The second use case is to prevent brute force attacks. Typically, brute force attacks consist of multiple attempts to log in with different combinations of passwords. And one way to prevent that is to, if the server notices that there are too many failed attempts to log in, then you can lock the account down, right, and stop the attempts to figure out the right password, right? So these were the two main use cases, and password check is used to check rules for strong passwords, and login profiles is a feature that we developed to help DBAs prevent brute force attacks on the database. So the first feature that I'm going to talk about is the password checker. Postgres comes with the password check extension. It is available in Contrib. You can load it up, and it comes with a basic set of rules. So the first rule is that it checks the password format to make sure that the minimum length is 8 characters. It also makes sure that there is a combination of alphabetical and non-alphabetical characters in the password, and also make sure that the password does not contain the username. Right? The feedback that we got was that these rules are too lax for current requirements among our customers, and they need to be enhanced. However, changing the rules in the password check extension involves changing source code, recompile, and then reload. Right? And this is not very DBA friendly. So what we did was we enhanced the password check extension within Yugabyte. We were inspired by the password check extra extension that is part of the PG plugins project. The enhanced extension adds a few configuration parameters which can be set during startup, and you can use these configuration parameters to specify the rules that are in line with the org policies. Right. So some of these configuration parameters are whether the password should contain lowercase, uppercase, numbers, what should be the minimum length, maximum length, and so on and so forth. Right. Just to give an example of a policy, right? So on the screen, this example policy specifies that the password format should have 12 characters, should have a minimum of 12 characters, and it should be a combination of lowercase, uppercase, and numbers. And it doesn't need to have special case, right? And I'll give an example of a password that satisfies these rules, right? So the demo password has a combination of numbers, lowercase letters, and uppercase letters, right? Now, some other org may have an extra rule that it should also contain special characters, right? So then you can change the policy to specify what are the special characters that are allowed. And in this case, and in this example, these are %, $, question mark, and @ and that at least one of these special characters is required, right? And the previous example won't work because it doesn't have special characters. And instead, what I've changed is I've changed the letter S into $, right? And and now the password changes, right? I'll quickly get into an example, right? But before that, I want to talk about, just give you a sense of what it takes to activate this extension, right? This extension has to be activated at load time and not at runtime, because you want every single password to be checked. Therefore, you need to change, you need to specify the password check extension in this parameter called shared preload libraries. Once that is done, the password check extension is loaded into during startup. As part of this configuration, you can also configure the parameters of the password check extension, right? And the example that I have given, I have changed the minimum length to be 10. You can specify all the different other parameters in a comma separated format, and it will go and configure the password check extension appropriately.
So just to understand this, right, Rajat, a little more. So what you're saying is this extension is pre-bundled. You don't need to install it. You don't need to load it at runtime. All you need to do is pass this flag and it will load it up. And, it's just
right.
All those rules already applied. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Got it. And another question is, which roles will this apply to? Because sometimes, if you're doing a password check, even as an admin, you may want to do it or not. I'm so just curious, how does this work?
The rules apply to every role, right? Including admin roles, right? So every single role has to follow the rules specified in this configuration.
Got it. And that's probably why it's like a startup flag at start time.
Right.
Flag.
Right. And yeah, and another one is that you shouldn't forget to load this extension, right? I mean, then you're kind of leaving a gap.
And suddenly you have a whole
right. Yeah. Right.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah. Keep going. Awesome. This is fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So next, I'll quickly show how I've set it up. What you're seeing on the screen is a Yugabyte Anywhere instance that we are running internally, right? And I've created this universe using this platform. And I have specified a T-server flag called Ysql_pg_conf_csv. And the shared libraries is set to password check. And I've also set up a configuration for password check that the minimum length should be 10, right? And once this is done, every single session will, whenever there's a password being set or changed, the password check extension is activated and it checks if the password follows the rules, right? Next, I'll move to my terminal and quickly show you some of the features of this extension. So I'm going to cheat here a bit. I'm going to specify the policy using set statements just so that it makes the demo easier and it doesn't require a restart of the cluster, right? But these policies should ideally be set as part of the configuration that I specified, right? So in this policy, as I used in the previous example, the minimum length has to be 12 and should contain lower, upper, and numbers as part of the password. Right? And I'm going to run these tests.
Just for clarity, when done this way, does it apply to the session or does it apply to the database? Like when done with a set, it probably just applies to the session, right?
Yeah, it probably, yeah.
So that's why you said
it
it has to be done.
Session,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, it has to be done.
Exactly, right? Otherwise, you can change the rules on a per session basis, right? And that doesn't make,
doesn't help.
That's not very secure, right?
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah. So the first simple example is that the password should not contain the username itself, right? And it throws an expected error. Similarly, another simple case where the password should not be too short. And another straightforward error. One nice thing about the extension is that once the minimum length of the password is matched, it specifies all the various other rules that it doesn't match, right? So you get to know upfront what all is missing in that password format, right? So for example, in this case, I just used digits and I haven't used any upper or lower case, and it gives me an error message that mentions that there are two different rules that have not been satisfied. Next, I'm going to run a successful command, right? So this password, demo password satisfies the rules. After this, we're going to change the policy a little bit and add special characters. So there are two specific rules for this: the set of special characters that are allowed, as well as that the special characters are required. Right. So once the policy has been changed, then the previous successful password, demo password, will not work anymore because it does not contain any special characters, and the error message says so. One thing to point out over here is that when you change the rules, even through startup, the password check extension does not go back into an audit of the password that currently exists, right? So current passwords, especially when you change rules, the current passwords might not be following the rules, right? There's only forward-looking, and it doesn't go do an audit of all the passwords that already exists in the system. Another failure case where I'm using a special character that's not part of the list, right? And it throws a specific error message. And finally, I use a password that follows all the rules, right? And the role is created with the password that follows the rules that we have set, right? And just to reiterate again, the password check extension helps with checking the password, that the password format follows all the rules, and these should be set up at start time using T-server configuration flag. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to move to the next feature, that is login profiles. And just to reiterate again, login profiles, we created login profiles to help DBAs prevent brute force attacks, right? Profiles are a name set of rules, and we have implemented, we implement the first rule right now, and the first rule is on the number of failed login attempts allowed. So these are consecutive failed login attempts, right? So
yeah, Rajat, there's a question from Sridhar, which is there a way, for example, a utility function to find all the old passwords or existing passwords that violate the newly set rules?
Typically in production, passwords are stored as hash, so we cannot go back and figure out what the actual password is, right? And check if it follows the rules or not, right? So best practice is not to store passwords in plain text within the database, right? So we do not have access to passwords in plain text to
so this is enforced at the time the user enters the password before it is compared. Okay,
exactly.
So,
it's
so
not at login time.
Okay.
It is during the create role command, right?
Makes
Even
sense.
within the create, yeah. So
what is the error reported?
Like
what is the error reported if it fails this check?
So the error report, the error contains specifies the rules that were not satisfied, right? So for example, in this case, I used all numbers, right? And it did not contain lowercase and uppercase characters. So the error message specifies that more than one rule was not satisfied.
Got it.
Similarly,
and just to complete the loop here, like, will this go into a PG audit or some error log, or will it go into some log where you can find out, for example, that, you know, this create role, test role, whatever it is, failed? It should, right?
I think it should, because this is like another error, right? Just like any, like every other errors, it should go there. I haven't tested it, but yeah, but I don't see why it won't.
Got it. No, totally fine. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Keep going.
Yeah. So talking about login profiles, profiles are a name set of rules. So the first rule that we have implemented is the failed login attempts rule. And the rule specifies the number of consecutive failed attempts that are allowed, right? So, a profile can be associated with a group of users, right? So you create a profile, and then there is a command to specify that a role is associated with the profile. When a user connects and is going through the authentication flow, the server will first check if there is an associated profile with it. And if the profile is there, it checks if the rules mentioned in the profile are being followed, right? I'll give you examples of this, right? But before that, what I want to do is I want to do a quick detour into YSQL authentication, because the behavior of YSQL authentication affects the behavior of login profiles. So it's good to understand the authentication flow within YSQL to be able to understand the behavior of login profiles, right? YSQL authentication is very similar to Postgres authentication. There are multiple methods available. For example, trust, peer, MD5, LDAP, and so on and so forth. Right? So these rules are specified in a file called YBPG-HBAConf, very similar to PG-HBAConf. And there can be more than one rule. There can be different rules for different roles. Also, there can be an all-encompassing rule. And this means that there could be more than one authentication method that might be applicable to a user or a role. And I'll give you an example of that. Right? When there are more than one authentication roles for a specific, more than one authentication rule for a specific role, what Yugabyte does or YSQL does is that it tries all the valid authentication methods until it succeeds or all of them fail. Right? So there are multiple attempts on the to authenticate, even though the client might have triggered only single login attempt. Right. The next interesting point is that there are broadly two classes of authentication methods. Right? There's the challenge and response authentication methods, and those that do not have a challenge and response. Right. So so for example, trust and peer, there is no challenge involved. So if the trust method is applicable, the server lets you in immediately. Right? There is no challenge, there is no response, there is no failure, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, methods like password, LDAP, and so on and so forth, there is a challenge and response. Right? In some cases, the response is a password or a hashed password, or in other cases, it might be security tokens. Login profiles is applicable only to methods that follow the challenge and response sequence. Just to give you a quick example of what I just spoke about, I have specified, I have shown an example of HBA, like of a configuration file. There are 4 rules in this file. The first one says that the Yugabyte role, if it is local or if it is logged in to one of the system, to one of the nodes of the universe, then it can use the trust method. On all hosts, it can use the password method, the Yugabyte role. And the other 2 roles says that for all the roles, including Yugabyte, LDAP and MD5 are also applicable. Right? So if you notice, 4 rules are applicable to the Yugabyte role. So for example, if we run YSQL sh -u Yugabyte and do not specify any methods, all the 4 roles might be applicable. And it might try all the 4 roles to successfully log in. Similarly, if we specify the -w option that says, I want to specify a password, then 2 of these methods are applicable, password and MD5, because the other 2 do not involve a password. So like in LDAP, we talk to an LDAP server and the authentication happens there, right? So yeah, so right, so like it's possible. Just want to point out that there can be multiple authentication methods and multiple authentication methods applicable to a specific role, right? So just want to give an example of that.
Yeah, it's good you gave this background. This is pretty applicable to this.
Yeah, so I'll get into a demo. And first, again, I'll show you how I configured the universe. Right? So I have another universe for profiles, right? And if we move this one away, we look at the flags. What I've done is, first of all, I've enabled profile. I forgot to point out that profiles are disabled by default. You need to enable it if you want to use it, right? So that's what I've done over here. And then I also added another one authentication method, which is applicable to the role Rajat, right? This is beyond the default authentication rules that were applied when I created the universe, right? So I have created this universe with SSL. So there's an SSL rule that's applicable. There's just a host. They specified that there's no SSL required, and I can use the MD5 password method, right? And this is only applicable for the role Rajat. It's not applicable for any other role, right? So these are the 2 configuration method parameters that I set. Next, I'll move to a terminal and we'll go through a few examples. These are my notes. At the top right is I've already logged into the cluster using the Yugabyte role, which is the admin role, right? So the first step is to create a role, create a profile. And there's a there's a DDL statement for it called create profile, and you have to specify parameters to it. The one parameter that we've taken now is the failed login attempts, which I've set to 3. This means that if a role fails successfully 3 times, it is locked. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and create this role. Oops. Okay, so I created a role. I'm going to create a couple of views. We do have I've added a couple of catalog tables as well, so that you can introspect what profiles are available.
So one question here, Rajat, which is you have a limit failed login attempts to 3, right? Is that automatically a part of the DDL, or like how does that work, or how did that work?
Oh, create profile and limit failed login attempts are keywords within this DDL. Eng is the name that I've specified, and 3 is the another parameter that I specified, saying that any role associated with this profile, the 3rd time it fails, it will be logged.
So the feature introduced these DDLs, right? Like for
exactly, yes.
Okay. So
yes.
This is all done at this level. Okay, got it. Keep going.
Yes. Yeah. So we've also added a catalog table called PG_YB_profile, which helps you introspect, which lists all the profiles that are available.
Now you know what is all set. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So next, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of roles, and I'm going to also run this another DDL parameter that we introduced to associate a role with profile. Right. So the alter user role profile name associates a role with the profile. Right. So in this case, I'm going to associate the role Rajat with the profile Eng. Right. So I'm going to create 2 roles, Rajat and Karthik, right? And I'm going to associate both of them with the profile Eng, right?
Yeah.
Next, we're going to check another catalog table called PG_YB_role profile, which lists the associations, right? So the first catalog table just specified the profiles. We have another, Postgres comes with PG_auth ID, which specifies all the roles, right? I've just written a simple statement to give the whole list, right? What are the
who are the people to whom this is each
exactly
profile is applied? Yeah.
Exactly, right? So if we run this, we see that both the roles Rajat and Karthik are associated with the profile Eng. There's a role profile status. There's an enum. The letter O specifies that the account is open, and the number of failed login attempts is 0 because we just created it, right? I'll quickly show you what the Ysql HBA conf looks like, right? So this is what the Ysql HBA conf is, right? So I started off this universe with SSL. So every single role has the SSL method applicable to it. But I also added this role called non-SSL, which is applicable only to the role Rajat, right? So the role Rajat has 2 authentication methods available to it, while all the other roles only have 1, right? Next, let's try to log in and provide a wrong password. So I'm going to log in as the user Karthik, and I'm going to give a wrong password to it. So the login failed. And when we check the catalog table, again, we'll see that the failed login attempts has incremented by 1, right? The counter gets reset when we successfully log in, right? So if I log in successfully now, the counter should be reset, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Just to make sure that fat fingering a password doesn't lock you out.
Right, exactly, yeah. So you do get a few chances, right? Next, let's have 3 failed login attempts, and then the account gets locked, right? So I'm going to provide the wrong password 3 times. And you'll notice that there's an error message which is different, which says that the role Karthik has been locked, right? And you have to contact the database administrator. If we go back and check the catalog table, you'll notice that the status has moved to L, which specifies lock, and the number of login attempts is 3 right now. Right?
It's pretty awesome.
Next, the recourse right now is to also, even if we specify the correct password, the role won't be able to log in. Right? So you just have to trust me that I'm providing the right password. Even though I provided the right password, it continues to be locked, right? So there's no reset once the account has been locked, right? So the only recourse is now for a database administrator to run another statement that we've added called alter user account unlock, right? So this will move the status from open, from L to O, which is locked, to open, and as well as
what privileges does that require to run this alter to unlock the user?
Super user.
Super user, got it. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So now, so if we check it now, it gets back to open and 0. Let's try the same thing with the user Rajat. And again, just to point out, the user Rajat has 2 authentication methods available to it, right? So if I run this and then I give the wrong password and check the catalog table, you'll notice that even though I try to attempt to log in only once, the counter has incremented by 2, right? And this is because the role Rajat has 2 authentication methods available to it. And internally, the server and the client have tried to attempt a login twice, right? And therefore it is incremented by 2. Right? And this is why
important to track. Yeah, this is very important to know what limit to set. Otherwise,
right.
You just it once and it's just
right.
lost.
Right. Yeah. So it's very important to kind of match the hba.conf rules to the number of failed login attempts that you want to set as, right? Okay. So like the next, let's go and reset the counter to 0 by having a successful login. Right. Okay. So now if you go back and check, it should be reset to 0. Another interesting experiment is to, since we're using SSL mode, it tried both SSL mode and non-SSL mode. If we specify the SSL mode as require, right? This only tries the SSL mode and doesn't try the other mode, right? So now if we have a failure using SSL mode as require, it has only a single attempt because we specified that we don't want to log in without SSL, right? And now if we go back and check, it would have incremented only by 1 because we only tried one of the authentication methods. Right. Yeah. So the next and the last experiment that I want to show you is what will happen if it completely, if the whole system is locked, right? So you can also associate admins with profiles, right? And therefore an admin also can potentially get locked, and all admins can potentially get locked, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to also associate the Yugabyte user with the profile eng, right? And then I'm going to lock this account. Right. So the Yugabyte account itself is locked now, right? And there is no super user to go and unlock that account. To get out of jail, the method requires a couple of restarts. So I won't demo the complete process, but what is required is to go back to the platform, turn off the Ysql enabled profile, and then none of the rules will be checked. Restart the cluster, log in as the Yugabyte user,
and then you can
and then reset the system.
And then do whatever.
Exactly.
And so turning off the enable profile to 0, would that remove all the associated profiles for any user, or does the profile remain associated but it's not active anymore?
Exactly. All the objects remain. The only functionality that's turned off is checking the rules.
Got it. Makes sense.
Right.
Makes sense. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the get out of jail card, where you go back and turn off the flag. And we are assuming that you have secure access to YB anywhere, right? I mean, YB anywhere access is not compromised, right? So then you can. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, it's hardwire reset. Yeah, totally makes sense. So before we close, I think we're at time, but this is a fantastic set of demos. Everything was awesome. Very well done, Rajat. But what other things, like it's called password, like login profiles, and you have number of login attempts, right? Are there other things that you're thinking, or?
Yes, there are a few other asks. A couple of them are password expiry time. So specify how long a password can be used for. And once the password ages for those number of months or dates or whatever it is, to go and expire the password and force the user to choose a new password. And associated with this is to control password reuse. That is, once a password expired, you can't go back and set it to the same password again, right? So there is a certain age until which you cannot use those passwords, right? So those are the couple of other rules that we are considering. Basically,
all those things that we encounter in daily life for a variety of different products, right? Like, which is
exactly.
Awesome.
And that's why we built the functionality such that it can be extendable, right? So we started off with a single rule called failed login attempts, but we are planning to add a lot more rules to help with secure password management.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you, Rajat. That was really awesome. Very a very awesome set of demos, really useful set of features. Once again, thank you everybody for joining us this week. Join us next week, same place, same time. We'll be doing another YFTT episode. In the meanwhile, if you have questions, drop it in the LinkedIn comment box, join our Slack, yugabyte.com/Slack, post your questions on the YFTT channel. And until then, thank you guys. Bye.